In Norway, just the last couple of days, Norway has literally declared virtually a net zero war by saying we're going to stop sending our electricity over to Britain. If they can't organise their own electricity, they had a wind drought, for example, where, as I mentioned last week, winds dropped to as low as 1% of supplying electricity needs in the UK because there was a wind drought. Now they go, oh, the wind drought is caused by climate change. So it's the perfect circular argument. It's all nonsense, and Norway have said we've had enough of this nonsense.
Sorry.
Yep.
There's a bigger point to this here. Let's bring it back to Australia, right?
Yep.
Okay, so set this out here. On the left, you've got all of these people who, what is their mantra? Oh, believe the science, we believe the science, trust the science is settled, right? They say this, but then they don't understand that the science says that there is absolutely nothing that we can do in terms of policy in this country that will do anything to change the weather, the wind, the temperature, the number of clouds, the amount of rainfall days. And so the idea that we need to somehow self-immiserate ourselves, because if we do so, we will appease the weather gods, trust the science people, and we'll have, the right amount of rainfall, and we won't have bushfires anymore. Well, that's all nonsense. And it is doubly nonsense because you look at China, well, they're building all these coal plants, I think 300 more by the end of the decade, something like that. And here, we are exporting our coal, we are exporting our gas, we're exporting our uranium. And if it's fine for these other countries to use us to make a buck off of, and, God bless us, I think we should, then it should be good enough to use that stuff right here at home to provide cheap energy for our consumers and for our manufacturers so that we can make stuff here, build stuff here, and not just have to buy it back from overseas.
100%. And as Rita was saying, the coalition have really got to get to grips with this issue. You can't hide behind it. You can't run away from it. Reality is going to catch up, and it's going to catch up very fast. And either the coalition embraces the new reality, and there's two big realities. One is the fact that Donald Trump, as Rita was saying before, is changing the entire investment outlook. If we want the miners, the big mining companies, the big agricultural companies, if we want the big investors to invest in Australia, we have to ditch net zero. It's that simple. Otherwise, we are destroying the future prosperity of every kid out there, every person who has a small business. The greatest impediment on our future prosperity is that net zero. It has to go. Now, even the banks, as James was saying, Rita, even the banks now, you've got the Royal Bank of Canada has come out and followed the Toronto Dominion Bank, James, and the Bank of Montreal. They're all coming out and saying, oh, actually, we're getting rid of all the climate nonsense. Tell us about it.
Well, yeah, again, you've had these sort of global agreements among all these banks to simply stop lending to fossil fuel projects, to coal, to gas, and all of that. And, of course, the idea was here that they would put pressure on the banks to put a pinch on the way energy was generated and the way things were mined and all of that sort of stuff. And, well, finally, again, I think that's a part of it is just simply the Trump effect. There is no more of this nonsense about how we're going to screw down our ability to make money, get stuff out of the ground, get resources out of the ground, and use them to create a better life for everybody, because that is ultimately what this is about. And I think that the people who, are all about this green cultishness, they don't want ordinary people to have a better life. And I feel like part of that is actually because, for them, they feel like they want to keep everybody relatively poorer to keep themselves in a better position relatively.
Well, the Australian banks, they're not immediately backing out of this UN-led net zero banking alliance, which I think is a disastrous move. But the banks here, well, they're very lucky because they've got the guarantee that we provide, so they're almost fail-safe. They can make stupid decisions and still make enormous profits. But surely it's a matter of time before they do also abandon this UN-backed net zero banking alliance, because the world has changed, and this is something the coalition has to understand. It's not just that Paris is no longer relevant, the Paris Climate Accord. There's been a political realignment, one we've talked about on this program for years, and much of the political class in this country refuses to see it, can't see it, goes against their narrative, but it is undoubtable. You've seen it in the UK, you see it in the US, it's certainly evident right here in Australia that the elite, the richest, are leaning left. The working class, the aspirational class, the middle classes are increasingly leaning right. So the coalition's future isn't in those former teal seats. It's not in the affluent inner city. It's in the outer suburbs. It's in the regional areas. And that's where these climate policies will work. And that's what they've got to accept reality at some point.
They have to accept reality, and they have to accept, the coalition has to accept, if they want to be the party of fiscal responsibility, if they want to be the party that we've had 7 quarters of declining productivity in this nation.
Yes.
If the coalition want to be the nation that makes this country rich, they have to abandon net zero. There is no alternative. Otherwise, you are lying to the people of Australia. So if you want to be the party of prosperity, which we all are desperate for you to be, that's what you've got to do. We are going to keep saying it, Rita, till we're blue in the face, because we have to, because nobody else is saying it.